The midday sun beat down on the cracked earth, drawing heat from the dust-choked road that cut through the small, judgmental frontier town. Chickens scratched at the dry ground, and a windless silence hung heavy in the air. Outside a weathered, splintered farmhouse, 18-year-old Clara stood with her hands folded protectively over her swollen belly. Her dress clung to her in the heat, stained and too tight around her middle. Her eyes, red from tears, stared at the ground as her father's voice roared through the yard. "You've disgraced this family," he shouted, spitting the words like venom. His fists were clenched, and his face, leathery and creased from years under the sun, was twisted in shame and fury. The neighbors whispered. Churchgoers averted their eyes. The boy responsible was long gone, vanished with a caravan weeks ago, leaving Clara behind to face the scorn alone. Her father paced, shaking his head. "No decent man will marry you. No kin will take you. And I won't be made a fool of any longer." From the shadows at the edge of the property, a towering figure stepped forward, Wyatt, the reclusive mountain man. Long beard, weather-beaten face, eyes like stone. He was a man feared more than understood, known for living alone deep in the wilderness. A crude deal was struck. Clara would go with him, no ceremony, no goodbyes. In return, her father would get 2 goats, a hunting rifle, and a sack of flour. A trade, like she was nothing more than stock. As Wyatt took the reins of his mule and motioned for Clara to follow, she cast one last glance at the house where she'd grown up, now just a place that had cast her out. Wordlessly, she stepped into a new kind of exile. The trail wound upward into the mountains, swallowed by towering pines and the hush of falling snow. Winter had come early in the highlands. The trees stood still like sentinels, draped in white, their branches creaking under the weight. The only sounds were the muffled clop of hooves in the slush and the occasional snort from the mule. Clara sat rigid behind Wyatt on the saddle, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her threadbare coat did little to shield her from the creeping cold. Her cheeks were raw, her fingers numb. Every jolt of the animal jarred her swollen belly, and every hour that passed made her more certain she was being led to her death, or worse. Wyatt hadn't spoken much since they left the farmhouse. Just a quiet, "Hold on," when they mounted, and not a word since. His silence was almost as terrifying as her father's fury. He was built like a grizzly, broad shoulders, shaggy hair, and hands rough from years of labor. She dared not ask where they were going. She didn't even know if he had a home. But then, when the snow thickened and the wind picked up, Wyatt did something unexpected. He stopped beneath a cluster of fir trees and pulled the thick wool blanket from his own pack. Without a word, he draped it around her shoulders, tucking it in with surprising gentleness. Later, he paused again to check her boots, frowning at the frost creeping in through a worn seam. "We'll stop soon," he muttered, glancing at her only briefly before moving on. She didn't respond, but something inside her shifted. He hadn't tried to touch her. He hadn't yelled or cursed. Each small, quiet act of care chipped away at her fear, just a little, and replaced it with a dangerous flicker of confusion. The cabin came into view just as twilight bled through the snow-covered trees. Smoke curled gently from the stone chimney, the only sign of life in the silent wilderness. Nestled in a hollow between 2 ridgelines, the sturdy log cabin stood as if carved from the earth itself, weathered but solid, built to endure the elements and the solitude. Wyatt dismounted first, helping Clara down with a quiet steadiness that startled her. He didn't linger with his hands, didn't leer or speak softly like men in town sometimes did. He simply handed her the reins to steady herself and unlocked the heavy wooden door. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar, earth, and smoke. It was rough, no curtains or polished floors, but clean and thoughtfully kept. A large stone hearth dominated the room, and beyond it, a small door opened into a second space. "That's yours," he said, motioning to it. "Privacy matters." Clara was stunned. She'd braced herself for chains, for being watched, for the worst. Instead, he gave her a room with a narrow bed, a wash basin, and a window that faced the mountains. Days passed, marked by rhythm and routine. Wyatt rose early and chopped wood. She learned to tend the fire, boil water, and sweep the floor. When he showed her how to bait a line and skin a rabbit, it was with the patience of a teacher, not a master. He never touched her. Never raised his voice. At night, when the silence clawed at her and the pain of betrayal returned like a phantom, she cried into her pillow. And every morning after, without a word, a mug of warm herbal tea sat waiting outside her door. She started to look at him differently, not as a monster, but as a man who had chosen gentleness in a world that offered so little of it. The wind howled like a wounded beast, rattling the cabin shutters and forcing snow through every crack in the logs. Outside, the world had vanished into white. Inside, the fire roared, its light dancing wildly across the walls, but it couldn't warm Clara's trembling body. She was on the floor near the hearth, knees drawn up, sweat dampening her hair despite the bitter cold. The pain gripped her like iron claws, wave after wave, leaving her gasping, clutching at the blanket beneath her. Her time had come, and she was terrified. Wyatt paced just feet away, his usually steady hands trembling, eyes wide with panic. "What do I do?" "Tell me what to do," he muttered, more to himself than to her. He had faced bears, blizzards, starvation, but this? This was something he couldn't fight with an axe or a trap. "I can't," Clara whimpered, her voice cracked and desperate. "I can't do this alone." "You're not alone," he said quickly, dropping to his knees beside her. "I'm here. I ain't leaving you." The hours stretched long. Wyatt fetched hot water, tore sheets, braced her back, and wiped the sweat from her brow with shaking fingers. When she screamed, he flinched but didn't falter. His voice stayed low and steady, guiding her through the storm inside her body and the one raging outside. Finally, as dawn's gray light began to creep through the storm clouds, a sharp cry pierced the air. A baby's cry. Clara collapsed backward, tears streaming down her cheeks, her body spent and broken, but her heart overflowing. Wyatt wrapped the newborn in a flannel cloth, his voice choked as he looked at her. "She's here. You did it." Clara could only nod weakly. He glanced at the child and whispered, "Hope. Her name's Hope." And in that moment, Clara knew, she had never been safer than in this man's arms. The snow had long since melted, replaced by budding leaves and the sound of water dancing over rocks. The mountain stream ran clear and cold, fed by distant glaciers, weaving its way through mossy banks and wildflowers just starting to bloom. Birds called in the canopy overhead, and the air carried the scent of pine and new life. Clara sat on a flat stone near the water's edge, her daughter swaddled against her chest in a sling made from an old flannel shirt. Her eyes followed the stream as it wound downhill, disappearing into the trees, the same direction that led back to town, back to the life she once knew. Behind her, Wyatt crouched to rinse a tin cup in the stream. His movements were quiet and careful, like always. He hadn't changed much since the day he'd brought her here. Still the same gruff, solitary man. But she had changed. Her cheeks were full now, her hands strong, her heart, healing. "I can take you back," Wyatt said gently, breaking the quiet. "If you want. Now that the snow's gone, it'd be an easy ride." Clara looked down at her baby, then out toward the trees. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, she shook her head slowly. "They gave me away like I was nothing," she said, her voice steady. "You never even asked for me, and still, you treated me like I mattered." He didn't respond, just watched her, the way he always did, silent and respectful. Clara smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I'm not going back. Not because I can't, but because I don't want to." She stayed, not out of duty or desperation, but because in Wyatt's quiet company, she had finally found something the town had never given her: dignity, safety, and the choice to belong.